looking at the U.S. and I don't want to be cheeky and say speaking directly to the U.S. government, but if I were to be so bold, so if this is that predictable moment where, okay, there are actions that we can take as a country that will either help us keep the world reserve currency status, and there are actions that we can take that will cause us to lose that status more quickly. It seems like, okay, you've got the BRICS nations. They are moving away from the dollar. It seems like that card has already been played. I don't know if you think there's anything that we can do to make that easier. But certainly speaking to printing. So one thing that I've heard recently, and this is a really fascinating concept, that when you have other nations that are holding your currency, holding debt, as you said, they're not like hoarding cash, but they're holding a lot of debt. If we print money, what we're essentially doing is externalizing inflation. So we are causing a devaluation of that debt for all the countries that hold us. Now we're in a moment with rising interest rates that's causing us to need to print, but creating this really weird, difficult moment where as we print, then we have a need to raise interest rates. But the reason we're having to print is because we're raising interest rates. So it's a very difficult moment. But if we could, going back to your idea, it's how we are with each other. If we could get people to come together in the middle, would one of the things we would want to convince the U.S. government to do is to be very cautious about devaluing the dollar? Is that an important idea?
It's more basic than that, and it's more simple, but it's also more difficult. What the reason cycles exist is that the next stage has been determined by what has already happened in the prior stage. So we are in debt a lot. You can't change that. We got a lot of debt. And if you say, what could you do? I mean, two things come to mind. What you could do is you could be financially strong, and you can not use financial sanctions as a weapon to scare the holders of those bonds. But to be financially strong requires you to not spend more than you earn. That means you either have to cut your spending or raise your earnings. Okay, that ain't easy. Okay, so are we going to cut our spending? Okay, now you look at it. What are you going to, infrastructure programs, I don't know, poverty transfers, defense spending. Okay, what are we going to cut? The world, governments have the same basic economics as people, except for the fact that they can take money from one person and give it to another, and they can print money. That's it. And so when you look at this, okay, you have that gap. You can eliminate the gap by taking money from some and eliminating another and not spending much. Okay, that's not easy, right? Okay, what are you going to... Most governments now don't think, how much money do I have to spend, and then how do I prioritize that? They think, I need to spend on this, I need to spend on that, and I need to spend on that, and they spend on it, and then they either produce a deficit, and then you either have to pay it back with hard money or printed money, and that's situation. So when you say, what could we do? Well, you've got to get financially strong in a politically fragmented environment in which everybody wants more. And you have to, like be a higher percentage of world trade so that everybody wants to use your currency, and be and not threaten the holders of that bonds with freezing their assets.
It is it's a tall order in this moment. It has become so clear to me in the last month since you and I saw each other, how important, the reason that you keep coming back to it all comes down to how people treat each other. So in this moment, I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, but it does feel like the die is cast a little bit. I don't see how we pull ourselves back from the precipice because, to your point about being fiscally responsible, like we'd have to get into a position where we're making more than we spend. I want to circle around to something. As you were talking, you mentioned infrastructure, and it got me thinking about, okay, what are things that we would need to go right? So I think everybody is aware, and I've heard you say that there are changes that are going to need to be made to capitalism in order to bring back a thriving middle class and the importance of the thriving middle class. And you've defined the things, again, staying to the theme of principles here, of the three things that we need to do to be strong as a country, or for any country to be strong. And you said 2 parents in the home, great public education, and then equal opportunity. Where do you see us on those? Are we moving in the right direction, moving in the wrong direction?
Well, again, maybe I aspire too much to 2 parents in the home. It's certainly better if you have 2 loving parents raising a family. That's good, but maybe that's too much to ask for. But in other words, good parental guidance. Okay, you're raised well, you're educated well. You can go to a public school that educates you well, and you have good guidance, so you're well raised in a healthy environment. And not only do you learn, skills and all that, but you learn how to behave well with each other. So you learn civility, and so you come out capable and civil to a land of opportunity in which you can, work and have a good environment. And really, that's all you need if a society does that, right? And I think where the things that are going on. Education, in a lot of public education, is deteriorating. It's a real problem. My wife works to help the poorest school districts, the poorest people in the state of Connecticut. And the state of Connecticut is it's always 1, 2, or 3 in terms of the highest per capita income. And in the state of Connecticut, as of the last survey, 22% of the high school students have either dropped out of high school,
Whoa,
or have absentee rates which are greater than 25% and are failing classes. So they're living in areas that don't have the things I'm talking about parents' nutrition and so on. And there's not adequate resources for them. For example, during COVID, we found that 60,000 students didn't have computers or connectivities to take classes, and the government wasn't going to provide it. So philanthropically, we bought 60,000 computers and give it to the kids, and but we can't do that. So our society is, when you look at this, you see drug problems. You see how the cities are changing. The cleanliness of the cities, the education levels of the cities, mental illness, crimes, and so on. You're not seeing, You're seeing people fighting with each other a lot. Not all the time. There are wonderful places in the United States. Education, some of the best universities, their pockets, some of the best, their neighborhoods, but there is this encroaching. So you see infrastructure breaking down. School shootings. I mean, I don't, okay, so you decide how we doing.
I think we're doing pretty badly. I don't know. I mean, look, it's not going to be a popular thing, but I think going back to what you were saying about the parents and maybe asking for two people is too much. Look, I get it. I think everybody's doing their best, and God knows, for any single parents out there, you have my love and respect. That it just seems like a hard job when there's two of you, let alone one. So I'm not throwing shade, but in terms of cultural momentum, when I look at people not getting married before they have kids, incentives that end up leading people to where it's actually more economically advantageous to have a child when you're single, does not strike me as a great idea. And trying to reverse that trend, I think, is going to be really important. Really putting a ton of time and energy into making sure that we are looking at ourselves on a global stage from an educational standpoint, and understanding that we're competing against, I mean, just to really make it stark, we're competing against China. Now, I have employees that grew up in China. I actually have some contractors that are in China currently. And when I see the discrepancy of what demands the educational system places on them when they're young versus the demands that we place on our students when they're young, it creates a ripple effect as they get into the workforce in terms of just the expectations that they have of themselves, the drive, the desire to excel. So these strike me as really, really problematic things. I'd love to talk to you about Singapore. So as we're talking, and I haven't studied Singapore very closely, but when I think about, how they've created something that seems really amazing very recently and sort of born up out of nothing, is it those three principles? Two parents in the home, quality education, equal opportunity. I mean, is that it, or is there something else?
Earn more than you spend. Be well educated to help you earn more than you spend. Be civil with each other. Be productive. When you come out equal opportunity, and it's not just like in Singapore, but it's true in other countries. There's a level below which nobody should go. Certainly children should not go, right? How can you have an environment that children, there should be basics of housing, healthcare, certain basics, because otherwise you build a cycle. I mean, when the children become adults, you might say, oh, it's up to them to do it. But if you mess up the children early, they become the adults who can't do it. And so you have this cycle, in which you have to take care of people. You walk around and look at it. You can see the gaps, the opportunity gaps. You can see the mental illness gaps. Walk down the street and, downtown Manhattan or lots of places and see the gaps. Okay. And that adult who is screaming, and homeless and whatever, came from a place, a reason, that made him that way. And, so it's like why isn't the computer given to the kid who doesn't have a computer so he can have learning? Think about how difficult it is for the kid who doesn't have learning, and they have one parent, and that parent might have in a poverty and might have drug problems and all that. I mean, the kid can't make it. So the kid's going to come up to be an adult. Okay, what kind of an adult is it? It's going to be a problem.
So I know that a lot of people are going to say, okay, well, raise taxes, we'll have money for all of that. That doesn't seem to be how things work, but I'm open to being wrong about that. There's a book coming out I'm very interested to read called Taxes Have Consequences, which I don't think people think a lot about, but it is entirely possible that I'm wrong. So if we look at someone like Singapore, do they just have really high tax rates and they distribute it in a way that makes sense?
What they did was they required savings,
They require it?
require savings. An employee, I think it works like this. Employee gives 12% of their incomes. An employer gives 22%, 10% of their income. So they saved something like 22% of their income is in savings. Okay. They do other things too. They have a tax balance, but they have a savings. And as a society, they earn more than they spend. Okay. So, and then on housing, for example, they have a public housing that is subsidized, that the person can take their savings with to use to buy that public housing that is a saving through that saving. So everybody has good housing, good public housing, and they own it. So if it goes up in value, they can sell it, and so they have that. So the housing creates a good environment. They put a lot of money into education, equal education. It's not people there don't have to go to a private school to get good education. So they have good education, and then they have the people who work hard and are civil with each other, and that's how it works. And forget about Singapore. If you look through history, these are basic fundamental things. So wherever they've happened in history, they've worked, and you can go back through all history. If you these basics, earn more than than you spend, be well educated, be civil, be productive, those types of things. That those fundamentals work.
What is it about the human personality that makes it so common that people don't deploy those things?
It's so interesting to me because I found that when people get richer, the societies get richer, they typically get in more debt, which seems backwards. Like, so for example, I watched the first time it happened when the United States started borrowing money from China. The United States had income that was per capita income 40 times those from China, and they're borrowing money from China. So I wonder, like, how does that really happen? And there's when you don't have much money and you're at a stage of life where you value money, you want to save. So there's a psychological thing. You don't have much money, you get some money, and you want to save it. And to save it means you have to lend it to somebody. Then what happens is, ironically, when everybody earns more money and it's easy to borrow, people will get in debt, or society will get in debt, or the government will get in debt. And also then there become very big wealth gaps. And people basically are interested in taking care of themselves. And so you have a fight over taxes or something. And so you have a society that borrows. Just even think the political system cycle. People pay, if you're a new politician and you run a state or you run, let's say, a state, and it's before an election, it's in your interest to borrow and spend, because nobody pays any attention to the borrowing, where the money comes from. They pay attention to the spending. So give them stuff, go spend, give them stuff, have a party. It's like having a party on debt. And there's this short-sightedness. It's like raising kids, they call it the marshmallow test, you ask a kid in early age, I can give you one marshmallow now, or I can give you 2 marshmallows in 15 minutes. Which would you prefer? And, okay, the smart one says, I can defer my gratification for 15 minutes and get 2 marshmallows. We have a lot of society who wants it now. So is it enjoyable to take your money and spend it on better infrastructure? Or let's take the education system. The education system, according to the Constitution, is a state decision. So it's not federal, not mostly federal money. Then you come down to the state, and it's mostly a tax district. If you're in this neighborhood, through property taxes and so on, you will get the money to educate your children in that tax district. So naturally, richer tax districts will have better money. And so, like, I'm in Greenwich, Connecticut. And last numbers I looked, I'm sure they're higher than this now, but it was not that long ago, is in Greenwich, Connecticut, it was $24,000 per student. In Bridgeport, Connecticut, which is like 10 minutes up the road, it's $14,000 per student.
Whoa.
And they need more money because they're poor. So if you just take, it's not just education. How do you clothe the kid? How do you feed the kid? How do you give them the computer that doesn't come through the school and all that? They need more, not less budget. So those are the mechanics of it. First, you have to go to bipartisanship. Like if I was president, I would have a bipartisan cabinet. And then if I was dealing with the economic problems, I'd get smart people from the right and smart people from the left who want to make this thing work. And I'd put them into like a Manhattan Project kind of thing. In other words, put them into 6 months in which they have to agree on a system that's going to work. Tie them together and force them to agree and come out with that and have them gain control over the extremists who are going to fight. Like, I don't really care exactly how it works, just as long as, like, if smart people from both sides can get together and make it work, and then you come back to these basics, okay, how do you earn more money than you spend? How do you educate your children well, whether or not, and deal with those problems that way in a together way, you'll get the best outcome. If you don't do that, you won't get the best outcome.
Yeah, I think this is really brilliant. If you like that clip, check out the full powerful episode here, and I'll see you there.